She's just here for leftovers. My brother snickered, licking barbecue sauce off his fingers while balancing a beer can in the other hand. The paper plate in my hand suddenly felt like it weighed 20 pounds. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. Everyone at the table laughed, my cousins, my uncle, even Aunt Joanne, who always pretended to be neutral. The laughter wasn't loud. It wasn't even cruel. But it was sharp, cutting in that way only family can manage. I stood there on the edge of the backyard, sweat clinging to my neck under the sweltering Alabama sun, clutching a plate of ribs I hadn't even asked for. I wasn't hungry. I had no appetite, not for food, not for fake small talk, not for this brand of casual humiliation wrapped in Southern hospitality. Uncle Gary piped up, grinning like a worn-out politician. Still working that diner job, Reese? He didn't wait for an answer. I saw your car outside. You know we got a guest spot for parking, right? Not the lawn. Laughter again. Clinks of beer bottles. A few uncomfortable smirks. But no one said anything. Not even Mom. She just kept stirring the macaroni salad. I swallowed the sting in my throat and glanced at my sister-in-law, Camilla, who was dressed like it was the Met Gala instead of a barbecue.
She didn't laugh.
But she didn't stop it either. Her gaze slid away from mine like I was invisible. Or worse, pitiful. Guess we should have grilled extra for the working class, Brian added with a wink. That one stung. I was the only one who wasn't married, didn't have a mortgage, and hadn't gone corporate. I still rented a room behind a gas station and worked 6 days a week at Jody's Diner off Route 18. They all knew it, and they never let me forget. But I stayed quiet, because I didn't come for them. I didn't come for food. I came to deliver a promise. And right then, just as I turned to set my untouched plate down and make an early exit, the sound of screeching tires cut through the backyard chatter. Everyone turned. At the front curb, just beyond the wrought iron fence, a sleek black limousine pulled up like it had taken a wrong turn on its way to Hollywood. It gleamed under the sun like a moving mirror. The doors didn't open immediately. I heard Camilla mutter, "Did someone die?" Brian stood, beer still in hand, squinting toward the street. What the hell? The driver in a fitted black suit stepped out, walked around, and opened the rear door. Then a figure stepped out.
Tall.
Charcoal gray suit. Expensive sunglasses. He moved like someone who owned the ground beneath his shoes. Every head turned, every laugh died, and the air turned electric. And then he looked straight at me, only me, and smiled. And in a low, commanding voice that rolled across the backyard like thunder, he said, "You forgot to invite the host." Silence. No one breathed. Brian's face paled. Mom dropped the spoon into the salad bowl. Gary choked on his drink. And I simply stepped forward, dropped my plate to the ground, and said, loud enough for every single person to hear,
"Hi, Ethan."
"You made it." And just like that, their laughter died for good. The silence after Ethan's arrival wasn't awkward. It was electric. Everyone just froze. You could hear the cicadas buzzing in the distance and the click of Ethan's polished shoes as he walked across the gravel path like he owned the place. Because technically he did. Uncle Gary blinked first, clearing his throat. Sorry, what do you mean, host?" Ethan stopped in front of the table, pulling off his sunglasses with a deliberate calm. His eyes scanned the crowd, bored, amused, dangerous. The way men look when they're holding a secret they can't wait to unload. "Is this not the Simmons family annual barbecue?" he asked, looking around. "Because I'm pretty sure this backyard was paid for, along with the mortgage, the fence, the grill, and about half the cars parked on the lawn by me." Mom gripped the edge of the table. "I don't understand." I stepped beside him, for the first time in years not feeling like an outsider in my own family. "Everyone meet Ethan Carrington," I said. "My business partner." And then, because I wanted to feel the shock hit them like a truck, I added, "and the co-owner of Carrington Simmons Property Group." Brian looked like he'd been punched in the gut. "Wait, what?" Camilla blinked fast, visibly recalculating everything she knew about me. Uncle Gary, never one to be outdone, forced a laugh. "That's a good one. You Owning part of a real estate empire? Come on, Reese. You still smell like French fries. Ethan's face didn't twitch. He turned to Gary and said with the politeness of a cobra, "Actually, Mr. Simmons, we just closed a $48 million commercial deal. Reese here did all the fieldwork. Negotiations, permits, contractor auditing. She's impressive." His tone sent a shiver down the table. But he wasn't done. "And since this home, your home, is part of our shared investment portfolio," Ethan added, slipping something from his inner pocket, "you may want to read the new contract terms." He tossed the envelope on the table. Brian picked it up, opened it, hands shaking, and his lips moved as he read. Mom finally found her voice. "Why would you help her? She's a waitress." I turned to her slowly, my voice even. "Because while you all were laughing at me, I was working double shifts to pay for night classes. Then Ethan came into Jody's for a coffee 3 years ago. I noticed he left behind a folder. I ran after him, returned it. He hired me as his assistant a week later. Said I was the only one that noticed he dropped it." Ethan nodded. "One of the best hires I've ever made." Camilla stood up, flustered. "So you're rich now?" I looked at her.
No.
"I'm respected. That's better." The guests who'd once laughed were now quiet, some shifting uncomfortably, others staring at their plates. The same people who whispered behind my back were now calculating how fast they could befriend me again. But I wasn't there for revenge. I was there to take back my power. Camilla's question, "So you're rich now?" hung in the air like the smell of overcooked meat. But I didn't answer it again. I didn't need to. I could see it in their faces. They weren't asking out of curiosity. They were asking out of fear. Brian's grip on the contract shook ever so slightly, his mouth half open like a fish gasping for air. His perfect family man confidence was unraveling by the second. He looked over at Mom for backup, but she was still frozen, her mind trying to race through years of insults and assumptions that now felt horribly out of date. Uncle Gary, never known for subtlety, suddenly barked out, "Hold on just a damn second. You're telling me this whole thing," he waved his hand at Ethan, the limo, the envelope, "isn't some kind of publicity stunt or scam?" Ethan turned his head slightly and arched an eyebrow. "You think I drive around in a Rolls-Royce, wear a $6,000 watch, and walk into your backyard in 98-degree heat for a prank?" Gary stammered. "I didn't say." "You didn't have to." I cut in. My voice was calm, but it had that edge. The one I had learned to use at city planning meetings when contractors tried to talk over me. "You all already decided who I was years ago. The loser. The waitress. The girl who couldn't get a degree, couldn't keep a man, couldn't do anything right." I paused, then looked directly at Brian. "You used to tell me I was the family stain. Remember that?" Brian flinched like I'd slapped him. "Reese, come on. I was just kidding back then." "No," I snapped, my voice rising just enough to silence the whispers. "You were never kidding. None of you were. You all laughed every time I showed up late because my manager wouldn't let me off early. You made me sit at the kids' table when I was 27. You made comments about my clothes, my hair, even the kind of food I brought to potlucks. Like I was less." Camilla cleared her throat, trying to shift the tone. "We didn't know you were so serious about your career." "My career?" I laughed bitterly. "Camilla, you asked me last year if I was still folding napkins. Even Mom had the grace to look down." Ethan took a step closer to me, his presence grounding me like steel. "Reese doesn't just have a career. She's one of the most detailed, driven partners I've ever worked with. She negotiates like a shark and works like her life depends on it. She's helped restructure 3 major housing projects in the state. You don't even know what you have in her." Brian tried to stand taller. "You didn't have to embarrass us, Reese." That got me. "Embarrass you?" I whispered, taking a slow step forward. "Do you know what's embarrassing? Walking into a room full of your own blood and being treated like furniture. Being asked if you're dating, yet like that's the only metric of success. Being laughed at for working hard because your job doesn't come with a 401k or a dress code. And the worst part?" I went on, voice thick with emotion now. The absolute worst part was that I kept coming back, hoping maybe this year would be different. Maybe you'd see me. But no. You all just doubled down. Gary shoved his hands in his pockets. Well, if this is a pity parade, I think I'll... You're not going anywhere, Ethan interrupted smoothly. Because you're on my property. And I have a few things I'd like to clarify. Everyone froze. You see, he continued, this house? The deed now belongs to me and Reese. Which means legally, she owns the very land you're standing on. Gasps rippled through the backyard like a gust of wind. And as of this week, Ethan added with a faint smile, your mortgage has been paid off, not by you, not by the bank, but by us. Which means... He looked at me. I smiled coldly. Which means you're welcome to finish your barbecue. But starting tomorrow, we'll be reviewing occupancy terms. Brian's beer slipped from his hand and hit the grass with a soft thud. Mom looked like she couldn't breathe. Camilla was blinking hard, likely trying not to cry. And for once, I didn't feel ashamed. I felt free. Powerful.
Scene.
The rest of the backyard, once bursting with arrogant laughter and the pop of beer cans, now sounded eerily quiet, except for the low hum of the limousine engine still purring in the driveway like a silent threat. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was uneasy. Everyone stood frozen. The same people who had mocked my job title, my appearance, my quietness, were now realizing they had no idea who I'd become. Camilla suddenly stepped forward, her voice syrupy sweet and shaking with manufactured warmth. Reese, honey, I had no idea you were doing so well. You should have said something sooner. I mean, we're family. I tilted my head, smiling just enough to make her squirm. That's funny, because last Thanksgiving you called me a walking cautionary tale and said I lowered the family aesthetic by wearing thrift store jeans. Her cheeks flushed deep red. That was just banter. No, I said calmly. That was cruelty. You just dressed it up like a joke. And then I turned to my mom. She still hadn't said a word. Still hadn't stood up for me. Do you know how many times I wanted to tell you, Mom? I asked, the emotion pushing against my ribs. When I got promoted. When I bought my first stake in the company. When I negotiated my first six-figure deal. I wanted to call you. I did. But I knew what you'd say. Her eyes glistened, and for a moment, her lips parted like she might finally offer something, an apology, a sliver of warmth, anything. Instead, she whispered, you should have told us anyway. And just like that, I knew we weren't the same. Not anymore. You didn't want to know, I said quietly. You wanted me small, manageable, familiar. But I outgrew that version of me. And now you don't recognize who I am. Ethan reached over, resting a hand lightly on my shoulder. It grounded me. I turned back to the rest of them. You made me feel like I was background noise at every gathering, I said. Like I was something to scoff at. I worked 60-hour weeks, paid my own way through every class, fought through nights where I had to choose between dinner and gas money. While you all posted vacation selfies and congratulated each other for doing the bare minimum. My voice caught, but I kept going. I never asked for handouts. I never blamed anyone. I just worked, but all you saw was the uniform, the diner, the parking spot. And now that I've stepped out of your narrative, now that I don't need your validation, you're scared. Brian snapped. We're not scared of you, Reese. Don't flatter yourself. Ethan's hand dropped from my shoulder, and he stepped forward calmly. That's funny, he said, because I've been around billionaires, senators, and CEOs, and none of them stutter when reading a housing contract. Brian's mouth opened, then closed. Mom sat down. Camilla looked ready to scream, but didn't dare. Then came the question I expected. Uncle Gary's wife, Aunt Liz, who'd stayed quiet this whole time, finally cleared her throat and asked the one thing they were all dying to know. Why'd you come today, Reese? What did you want from us? I looked at her, then at every face in that backyard. And I said slowly, I wanted you to see me. Just once. I didn't need your praise. I didn't even need your kindness. I just wanted to know if you'd ever ask what I'd been building while you laughed. But none of you did. And now? Liz asked. Now, I said, voice steady. I don't need you to. I turned to Ethan. Let's go. We have a meeting at 4. He nodded and offered me his arm. As I took it and began walking away, Brian finally blurted out, desperate. Wait. So, what, you're just gonna walk off? After all this? I didn't even turn around. But my voice cut through the air one last time. I didn't come to take revenge. I came to deliver a message. What message? Camilla snapped. I smiled. I was never the disappointment. You just lacked the vision to see me. Then I stepped into the limousine, closed the door, and let the engine roar to life behind me. The limousine pulled away slowly, gravel crunching under the tires as I stared out the tinted window. The backyard grew smaller in the distance, along with the people I once twisted myself to please. They all just stood there, like ghosts at a funeral. Only this time, it wasn't me they were mourning. It was the version of me they could mock. Ethan sat beside me, silent for a while, giving me space. I finally spoke. You think I was too harsh? He looked over.
No.
You were honest. And that's something they're not used to, especially coming from you. I nodded, folding my hands in my lap. The silence in the car was thick, but not uncomfortable. Just heavy with the weight of years, memories, slights, and things never said. I didn't plan to humiliate them, I said. I know, Ethan replied gently. You planned to free yourself. And you did. I exhaled, a long breath I felt like I'd been holding for the past decade. The meeting that afternoon went well. I sat across a marble boardroom table, pitching a development plan for an eco-housing community in a neighborhood that looked a lot like the one I grew up in. The partners listened when I spoke. They respected me. Because they didn't see the diner uniform or the family bias. They saw the work. They saw me. Later that night, after everything settled, I went home. My real home, not the apartment behind the gas station anymore. A clean, sunlit loft with shelves lined with books I used to dream about affording. I kicked off my heels, made a cup of tea, and checked my phone. 12 missed calls. Brian.
Mom. Camilla.
A few from numbers I didn't even have saved anymore. And a single voicemail from Mom. Her voice was small. Tired. Reese, I know we weren't fair. I know I should have said something sooner. I just didn't know how to deal with the fact that my little girl had changed and I'd missed it all. You didn't deserve what we gave you.
I'm sorry.
I really am. I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I saved the voicemail. Not because I forgave her yet, but because it mattered that, after all this time, she said it. Later that week, I returned to Jody's diner. Not as a waitress, but as a guest. Everyone there welcomed me with open arms, like I'd never left. Jody herself hugged me so tight, I thought she'd crack a rib. You look like a CEO now, Reese, she laughed. But I remember the girl who used to give free pie to that old man who cried on Tuesdays. Still would. I smiled. Because I hadn't forgotten where I came from. That weekend, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten from my cousin Natalie. She was the only one who didn't laugh that day. She apologized for staying quiet, said she'd always admired me, but was too afraid of being outcast like I was. I called her. We went out for lunch. Talked like real people. That one moment of connection reminded me not everyone in that backyard had been the enemy.
Some were just too scared to stand.
And now, I didn't need anyone's permission to stand tall anymore. I wasn't the joke. I wasn't the background noise. I was the woman who'd built herself from scratch, while the world watched from lawn chairs and folding tables. I was the storm they didn't see coming. And I was just getting started.